Tekking Wizard Tumble! With mighty flannel action, because as we all know, witches and wizards all, of course, wear flannel. And I got some news for you, Barry. You're a wizard. You're a wizard, Barry. Of course, everybody already knew that. Hey everybody, how you doing? Tekking101 here. Today, talking about Burn the Witch, the limited run manga series by Taito Kubo. I'm actually going to put this back on. It's actually kind of chilly out today. Yeah, it's the last day of August. I was out for a walk earlier and, you know, in my shorts and t-shirt. And it's, the chill is in the air. Summer is ending and autumn is beginning. And that's my favorite season, so it's great. I lit like a pumpkin spice candle in my room, so it smells very autumny in here right now. And this series, Burn the Witch, it has a very autumn feel to it. I don't really know what that means, but it has one. It has a very autumn feel. That's my review for Burn the Witch, okay? It has an autumn feel, okay. So, yeah, I think most people kind of know about this already. This was announced alongside when the Bleach anime was returning in 2021. It was announced that Burn the Witch was also going to get, well, there was some confusion at first. I think some people were thinking it was going to get like a full straight anime, and then it was an OVA, and it's a movie. Well, I guess the movie and OVA, it's basically the same thing, but the movie is coming out in October. There's a trailer for it. You can go check that out. I'll leave a link for that in the description below. And alongside that, well, I guess before that, because right now it's currently happening, and the manga will probably, the limited run series will end right around the time the movie is released. We're only going to get 4 chapters of this, okay? 4 plus the pilot chapter that came out like 2 years ago in 2018. I talked about that when it first came out there. So, yeah, and if you watch the trailer for Burn the Witch, the movie, it's pretty apparent that they're just going to adapt, it seems like, these 4 chapters into the movie. Because there's scenes in the movie that are just like shot for the limited run chapters. So I don't know, if you read the manga chapters, you might just get spoiled for the movie itself, so you might just want to wait for that. They might add some stuff, they might remove some stuff, I'm not really sure, but there's a lot of scenes in these chapters, and we're only up to the 2nd chapter of this already, but I'm only going to be talking about the 1st chapter today. I already talked about the pilot chapter. I'm probably going to do this just in lieu of whenever we have One Piece breaks, kind of like how I did with the Return to Reverie. Whenever One Piece was on break, I talked about that. I'll probably talk about the Burn the Witch chapters whenever, you know, we have a One Piece break. So that's something for me to do. That's cool. But yeah, I was on a little bit of a vacation this past weekend. I took a little bit of a break, but I still read the chapters when they came out yesterday on Sunday. And I have to say, like, first off, I'm loving the story. I'm really digging the story of Burn the Witch. I love the main characters, Nini and Noelle, these protagonists. There's really cool characters. But I also had a moment where I was like halfway through reading chapter 2, and it didn't really hit me with chapter 1, but it hit me in chapter 2, like halfway through. I had a moment where I was just like in awe of the fact that Kubo's art and his writing was back in Shonen Jump. You know, because I reviewed Bleach for 5 damn years, and I still go back and reread Bleach all the time, but it's just like this one moment where, like, no, this is a new thing that Kubo is making in Shonen Jump, and his art seems to have just been, if not better than what happened with Bleach. His art skills haven't deteriorated at all. It was nice, you know, seeing his writing again and everything, like the kind of little things that Kubo did. You know, at like the beginning of chapter 1, there's a little bit of an internal monologue that Nini has as she's on her way to, into reverse London, where she's like, fairy tales are always just ridiculous, aren't they? You know, and I'm just like, yeah, that's Kubo's writing. That's something Kubo would do. This little like backstory monologue thing that she's doing, she's thinking to herself as she's walking to work. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? So I'm really digging the story, but yeah, I was just blown away by that. I'm sure a lot of other people were as well. And yeah, we only get 2 more chapters of this, but I'm liking the story where it's going so far. So for chapter 1 of this limited manga, it really does give the impression that yes, there was a pilot chapter, and the pilot chapter is canon. So the stuff that happened in the pilot chapter, that is important. So if you haven't read that, I would definitely go back and reread that. That's also available on the Viz website. But the characters that were introduced there, like Balgo and everybody in Osushi, those characters, they're still present here, as well as like the chief of the Pipers and everything. So you kind of have to understand what happened in the pilot chapter, and it goes into here. One thing I wanted to bring up before we even get into actually discussing the chapter, because like I said, the chapter itself does really serve to like be a reintroduction to the characters. So you have a moment with Nini and Noelle taking on a mythical creature called a Budbuck, and then they get back to HQ, and then they're like, okay, Noelle's more about the cash rewards, but there's also achievement rewards. There's all these different sectors of Wingbind and of the West Branch of the Soul Society. Like, they're part of a branch called the Pipers, which are like the group trying to like rein in the dragons and like conservation efforts. But there's also like a tactical battle squadron called Sabers. Those were talked about in the pilot chapter. But there's a bunch of different, I took a lot more notes this time because, you know, this is a whole new story basically, starting from like just the pilot chapter. That's all we have to go on here that Kubo's crafting here. So there's all these other different kind of sections of the West Branch of the Soul Society. It's very Kubo-esque for these different sectors of Wingbind and for the West Branch of the Soul Society, like the Incantation group, which is essentially like the Keto Core, is basically called the Anthems. And then we have the Magic Circle group called the Inks. Development is Patchworks. You know, I like just these single word names he's giving for these organizations. They're very Kubo-esque. I'm really digging this. I also had some, I don't know if this is just me, but there's some similarities to here to like Fire Force. I don't know if that's a comparison anybody else made or if you haven't thought about it, but I don't know. Reading this, I got some like Fire Force, also some references to it. I don't know. And it's interesting because the mangaka of Fire Force as well as Soul Eater is Okubo Sensei. So if you would have came out and said this was a collaborative effort between Kubo and Okubo Sensei, two Kubos coming together for the first time, I'd be like, yeah, I could see that. I don't know if that's just me being weird, but I saw it anyway. So I wanted to talk about the whole reverse London thing because I'm really, really loving the world building aspect of this. And originally, when I read the pilot, I was a little bit confused because remember, the end of the pilot had that big kind of shocker moment, which it was the West Branch of the Soul Society is here. So this is taking place in the same universe as Bleach. All right, when Burn the Witch, when the pilot first came out, at first we were like, oh, this is just like a separate universe, a whole different story. But at the very end, it's like, oh no, it's, you know, SSWB, Soul Society West Branch. So this is in the same thing. And if you look at the logo for Burn the Witch, which I have down here, you take the B and then like the upper half of the T, so that's a B and an L and then an E, and then there's a line in between the W, so that means an A and then a CH. So there's Bleach in the title. So it's in the same universe. But because it was in the same universe, I was kind of confused at first when I reviewed the pilot chapter of like how this whole thing worked. Basically, I was looking at it like a 1-to-1 ratio. Like, oh, so basically the Seirete, I mean, the Western Branch's version of the Seirete is Reverse London, and it's everything the Seirete is, just it's called Reverse London. And Hollows are the dragons, and Witches and Wizards are the Shinigami. That was the way I originally looked at that. That is, I'm pretty sure, not what Kubo's going for here. He's not trying to make it a 1-to-1 thing. This is, there are similarities, like, for example, they have spells, and they're all numbered, you know, like Keto, essentially, like spell number 31, Blue Spark. And they use these little, they're like wands combined with pistols, but later on you find out why they're called the Pipers, because they're not actually pistols. I mean, you can use them as pistols. You can take them out and like twirl them and everything. They look like pistols and they're wands, but they're actually designed to be like blown into like pipes. Hence the term Pipers. That's what they do. So, you know, there's references to like Keto and stuff, but overall, I'm going to take this off now because I'm a little bit too warm, but overall, it's supposed to be like different jobs depending on the branch of the Soul Society you're in. The Eastern branch of the Soul Society that we all know and love as you know, the Seirete and everything, and the Gote 13 and, you know, Shinigami going out and performing Kon Souls and all these souls and everything. That seems to be the East branch's job. The whole migration of souls, transferring souls from the living world over to the Soul Society and keeping that flow constant. That seems to be the job of the Eastern branch. The Western branch is more of like the conservation and protection and separation for humans and these dragons, keeping dragons isolated, making sure they don't come in contact with humans, and making sure they don't, like the dark dragons, because there's the light dragons and the dark dragons. Light dragons are useful. There's all these different kind of variations, like the Woolly Wallies, which are these big furry dragons that they use for textiles, conductor dragons, which are used for electrical generation in Reverse London, which is really cool, all these different types of dragons. And then there's the dark dragons, which are like they've gone evil, essentially, and they're gonna try to like attack humans and like ravage and destroy, and then that's when, you know, like the sabers need to get involved to like bring them down, right, and stuff like that. So don't think of dragons as like, oh, they're just hollows. That's just what the people in London call hollows, because they're not. And Reverse London is not the same thing as the Soul Society. No, it seems to be more of like a, you know how like in the final arc of Bleach we got the whole Silburn Shadow Quincy dimension, and it was a mirror image of the Soul Society, like it existed in the shadows of the Soul Society? That whole concept of like two sides of the same coin, like yin and yang, that really seems to be like what Kubo is going with Reverse London here. And we find out a lot more about this stuff in the second chapter of Burn the Witch that just came out yesterday, and I'm actually glad that did come out before I talked about it here, because that kind of opened my eyes a little bit more to what Kubo was going for here. But everything that exists in front London there's a mirror image of it in reverse London. So there's a Buckingham Palace in front London, like in our London. There's also a Buckingham Palace in reverse London. In the second chapter of Burn the Witch, there's a tabloid magazine and called The Realist, and the offices of The Realist is in front London. It's a modern skyscraper. It's a business. It's a magazine. Well, that same building and that same business exist in reverse London as well. You know, there's a Trafalgar Square. There's a Big Ben. There's all these things that exist in front London. They also exist the exact same way in reverse London, except reverse London has a different population, and everyone there knows like dragons exist, okay, and that's where Wingbind is and everything. So it's a little bit more mystical and magical. So that's the situation there. Like, if I was in London, and I don't live in London, I've never been in London. If Rustage, living in London, ever went into like a convenience store and bought a sandwich, that same convenience store with pretty much the same menu, maybe with just a little bit more of a mystical aspect of it, would exist in reverse London, okay? And the two main characters, Ninny and Noelle, they live lives in front London and reverse London. In front London, Ninny is the lead singer of a band called Cecil Dies Twice, or Cecil Die Twice, and then Noelle is a student at, I think, Braxton High School. So they have lives. It's like the whole duality thing. Like, they're not like the Shinigami live in the Soul Society and the Seirete, right? That's where the Shinigami live, and they only typically go to the world of the living when they're collecting souls or when something's going down here, like serious, like they have to stop a Gillion or they're on a special mission, okay? They don't live double lives. They don't have to do that. They live most of their lives in the Soul Society, okay? Not the situation here. It's like Noelle and Ninny and everybody, they live in this, like, in both of these areas, and they're kind of well known in both. Like, at least Ninny is, because she's the lead singer of this band, so everybody knows about her in front London as the lead singer, and everybody also knows about her as a member of the Pipers in reverse London. And also, don't think of the reverse London population as like, oh, those are the souls that have transferred, like, so they're dead souls that have transferred over. Like, no, that doesn't seem to be the case. It just seems like different populations coexisting in the same city. It's just one is normal London that we live in, and the other one is essentially normal London as well. It's just that people know witches and wizards and dragons exist. So, you know, think of it like, you know, kind of think of it like Harry Potter, sort of, you know, where it's not exactly like that, where there's like the muggles that live in the, you know, regular society, and the wizards that kind of keep separate from the muggles and stuff, and they use spells to protect so the muggles don't find them and stuff. But there's like, think of it more like that, just like there's two kind of like parallel dimensions on top of each other, okay? So that's the way this goes, all right? So that's something just to air out the confusion a little bit. And there also might be a Soul Society North branch and a South branch. They might be responsible for other stuff too, completely different duties. Like, the East branch handles like the souls, the West branch handles the dragons, the South branch handles Cthulhu, and the North branch handles, I don't know, Santa. Santa's up there, he's like, we're in charge of bringing joy and happiness to the world. Soul Society North Branch, you know. Okay, I don't know how this works, but at least a little bit more of understanding how it goes. All right, so let's get into talking about the first chapter, and like I said, a lot of this is recap, but we have the two main characters. One is Noelle Nihashi, who I think in the pilot chapter I said just basically looks like a Rule 63 Byakuya, so I'm still gonna go with that. And then we also have okay, I think I've been calling her Ninny up until now. I think her name might actually be Nini. I don't think her name was mentioned or spoken in the trailer. I was kind of hoping, but I think it might be Nini because of the way eyes are in Japanese. And yeah, so she's the lead singer for a band, and then Noelle is like a student. And there's like a ranking system in the Pipers called like the umbrellas. So Nini is the second umbrella, so she is the superior to Noelle, who's the first umbrella, okay? And so their job is to basically go around and just make sure that these dragons are, you know, taken care of, that they don't cause havoc in the city. I don't think their purview is to handle dark dragons directly, because that's kind of like a Sabers, like a tactical thing. So their job is like conservation sort of deal. Now, working for Wingbind, which is the name of this organization, all of these different sectors, you know, report to Wingbind, okay? So like the Sabers, Patchworks, Pipers, they all report to Wingbind Authority, and we later find out who the tops of those organizations are at the end of the chapter. It's this really cool scene where we pan out and we see, you know, these are the top of the horns, the supreme powers that be. I'm like, ooh, I love that kind of shit, right? But basically, they have jobs to do. So they get jobs. You know, Kubo, even back during Bleach, he had the whole thing where, like, yeah, the Soul Society was very feudal era Japan, but, like, Ruki and everybody still had, like, modern day cell phones, like soul pagers and stuff. So they apparently, it seems like a pretty kind of like Uber Lyft kind of deal, where they're living in front London, Noelle and Nini, and then they have their own lives there, and then they'll get, like, a thing on their phone of, like, ding, there is a job that you need to do. Go to this area and capture this budbuck. And it's like, okay, I accept this job. And then Noelle goes and then captures the budbuck. You know, she uses, like, you know, spell 31, you know, blue spark. And then there's another spell, 44, flash bumper, that Nini uses to, like, you know, make a net in the sky and, like, block it. The budbuck is pretty cool. It's a buck that then, whenever it comes in contact with magic or these spells, buds begin to sprout from its body. And then after you do the job, after you do what you're tasked to do, you go to an ATM or, like, a cash point or whatever, and you're like, ding, okay, you receive 500 euros or 500 reverse euros for this job. There's a reverse everything, like I said. Like, there's a BBC in reverse London called the reverse BBC. So there's computers, there's cars, there's cell phones, everything that kind of stuff exists in front London exists in reverse London. It's just more magical and mystical and whimsical and all that stuff, right? So, there's money you can get for jobs, but then there's also achievements, like, for each job. Like, after capturing the budbuck, Noelle goes up to the thing and she types it in. She's like, you received 8 out of 10 achievements. So I'm like, this whole process has basically been brought down to, like, video game logic, which I kinda love. You know, like, you're playing, like, you get, like, achievements for PlayStation or Xbox or something. Like, you know, it's like, oh, I'm gonna go, oh, do you accept this mission to capture this budbuck? And it's like, yes, I accept. Ding. Okay, please report to this location. I'm like, all right, so you go, you do the location, and then you get, like achievements based on, like, all right, you were a fast responder, keen eye, awesome capture, you know. But Noelle also took some flowers from the animal, which you think in a conservation aspect, like, you're literally taking stuff off the animal and pocketing it, you know, like as resources for later. That doesn't seem, so it's like, oh, you didn't save all of the, it'd be like in a video game where it's like, okay, capture this budbuck and make sure that you grab 20 buds and you receive an achievement for that. Like, bud awesome, you receive 20. And it's just like, so you get ranked in achievements for that, and I guess based on those achievements is how you get promoted in the organization, because Noelle is more interested in just the money aspect of all of this, getting money for these jobs, and Nini is more interested in the achievement aspect, so she can, I guess, be promoted to Sabers, because that's her big thing. She wants to be promoted from Pipers to Sabers, so I guess that's where the achievements come from, okay? So, yeah, it's just interesting that it's like, we've kind of gamed the whole aspect of this. It's just like, our job as members of Wingbind, this ancient organization, is to protect the land from dragons that may do harm from humans. And dragons, by the way, even the good dragons can still do harm, because if dragons come in contact with regular old humans like you and me for too long, there's like a dragon, like, toxicity level that can increase inside of you. And if dragon toxicity reaches a certain point, you become dragon-clad, which sounds badass, I know, but unfortunately, being dragon-clad doesn't really give you anything super crazy. Like, it doesn't, like, you think, like, oh, cool, does that mean I get scales and I can grow wings and I can shoot fire from my mouth? Like, I turn into half dragon or something? Or I become, like, a dragon slayer from, like, Fairy Tail, or like, turn into Natsu or something? No, it basically just means that you become essentially a magnet for dragons, including the bad dragons that want to, like, kill everybody. So, yeah, and you become more finely tuned to dragons, and so there's this guy, Balgo, who kind of looks like a dorkier version of Ichigo. Yeah, he has this little puppy named Osushi, and we find out in the pilot chapter, we find out Osushi is actually a dragon in disguise, and we find out in this chapter that, like, Balgo still hasn't reined him in so much. Like, Nini and Noelle are supposed to be watching him, but it's just like, oh yeah, that dragon-clad dude, whatever, we can't watch him 24/7. And it's like, anything that Balgo does, it's just he's attracting dragons to him, which isn't a good thing, because we see in this chapter there's a scene where a dragon's going after Balgo, but then there's another guy that gets in the middle of all this, and he's like, dude, keep away from me, I don't want that, because if the dragon gets too close to this random dude, then his toxicity levels increase. It's like millicrests. It's like this weird unit of measurement where Noelle takes out this thing and she's like, put your tongue on this. I'm like, okay. And it's like, And it's like dragon toxicity levels are 0.3 millicrests. It's like millicrest. That's an awesome, that's an interesting unit of measurement, but okay. And it's like, yeah, it's in normal parameters, you're good. And it said like, yeah, if a normal level reaches a certain point, you just get thrown in prison. You have to be isolated from the rest of society. So people are actually living in reverse London are actually terrified of being anywhere near a dragon for longer. Actually, you know what? I don't know if it might be just the dark dragons that do that, though. I'm not sure, because there's other dragons that, like, in second chapter, we find out there's dragons that just live in coexistence with humans. So I don't think that's the situation there. But at any rate, yeah, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on with the dragons, right? And Balgo is basically a dragon magnet. So there's the chief of the Pipers. He was actually promoted to Sabers at the end of the pilot chapter, but then he got demoted again. He's just this scruffy-looking dude with a mustache, and he always smokes like a chewed-up little cigar, a little mini cigar, and he's just like... And, you know, he's just this, kind of like this guy that just seems like he's in a position of authority, but no one respects his authority. And he's like, oh, come on, guys, you gotta go and help out. Come on, there's an innocent bystander being carried away by a dragon. You're supposed to be watching him, come on! And he's like, oh, fine, I guess we'll do it. Is there more money? Yeah, there's money in it for you. There's some achievements, too. And he's like, all right, let's go, let's do it. So that's basically the first chapter. Then there's a dark dragon that shows up at the end of the chapter, and Noelle and Nini have to deal with that, and the chapter ends there. Well, it ends on Noelle's side with using, it's actually, I don't think it was said in the manga, but in the trailer it was dropped. It was spell number 75, Gatling Claw, and she takes out her wand pistol pipe thing, and she blows into it and creates like a ring of magic, and then she fires off a bunch of these Gatling horns at the dragon. I think that's where the manga chapter ends, and we get a little bit more of that in the trailer, so that's pretty interesting, right? So that'll definitely be a scene in the movie. But then that's basically just reintroducing all the characters. Like, Balgo is a Dragonclad. Dragonclads are kind of dangerous because they draw dragons to them, like dark dragons, and that's not good because then that can endanger not only the Dragonclad, but also the entire city. The entire city is kind of like reverse London is kind of set up so whenever dragons attack, there's emergency blockades. So there's a Rutherford Street, there's a front Rutherford Street, and then there's a, reverse Rutherford Street. And then whenever a dragon attacks, the little sign just flips over to emergency, dragons here, stay away. And the people living in reverse London know dragons exist, so they're like, oh, well, there's an emergency dragon alert, okay, I guess we'll stay out of that. And then that's when the Pipers go in and try to save the day and everything like that, and Balgo is also present. So at the end of the chapter, though, which is the high point of the chapter for me, definitely, is when we get introduced to the top of the horns, the supreme authority of this Wingbind organization. So essentially, these are basically the Gote 13 captains of the West Branch of the Soul Society, or Wingbind, if you want to go with that, okay? And so we have the Magic Circle group called Inks, and they're led by Bruno Bangknife. Bruno Bangknife. Okay, I love the alliteration. It's like Bambietta Basterbine. I love the alliteration you're going with here, Kubo. And then we have the Incantation group, which is basically, I guess, in charge of, Keto spells and stuff, so the Keto Core equivalent. And they're led by Roy B. Dipper. They're led by Roy B. Dipper, and they're called the Anthems. And then we have the liturgy, or the religious aspect of this, the clerics of the West Branch. And they're called the Sacreds, and they're led by... Okay, her name is literally a C followed by a Q. So I don't know. Quintier Millivine? I don't know how to pronounce that. It's a C and a Q. That doesn't really exist too much in English. Then we have the Minstrels, which are the conservation aspects of this. Those are the Pipers. They're led by Tronbane Takenir, which is, he's like a dwarf kind of like a fellow, like a dwarf on Lord of the Rings or whatever. And then we have the tactical group, which are the Sabers, led by Sullivan Squire. That's a cool name. Sullivan Squire. He kind of looks like one of the, what was his name? I forget his name of this dude. He was a minor character in the final arc of Bleach, where he was one of the Sternreiter in the past. Hubert, I think his name was. So he kind of looks like Hubert. Then we have the development organization called Patchworks. This is basically the research and development R&D, the 12th squad from Bleach. And this is led by Saka Rin. But Saka Rin is the only person we don't actually get to see in the chapter. So I'm thinking this character is kind of like a Mayuri Kuretsuchi, Kisuke Urahara individual. So that's actually going to be really interesting if we ever get introduced to Saka Rin. So then we have the accounting division. Yeah, there's an accounting division. So this is already kind of different from the Gote 13. This is not a one-to-one. It's like, he's like, yes, the accounting division is led by, that's Kenpachi Zaraki. He's the leader. Well, no, he's Battle. He would be Sabers in this version of reality. I don't know. The third division, Rose. He's in charge of accounting in the Gote. So this is already, that's not the case. So that's already not a one-to-one. But they're led by a guy named Harry Shayik? And they're called the Billionaires. And then we have finally the Punishment Squadron, which are like the stealth corps of Bleach, and they're called the Gallows. And they're led by Wolfgang Slashblut. So, yeah, that's pretty cool. Like, I'm loving the names, and I'm loving the names of the organizations, and I'm also loving the names of the leaders of it. Very Kubo-esque. I'm digging it. And then that's where the chapter ends. The chapter ends with them basically seeing this guy, Balgo, with this dragon, and he's dragon-clad, and he's, like, drawing dragons to him. It's like, this is the first time a Dark Dragon has attacked Reverse London in, like, 100 years. We need to take care of this kid. And so the Wolfgang dude, the leader of Gallows at the end of the chapter, is like, yeah, we need to exterminate this Balgo guy, this dragon-clad dude. We have to get rid of him, because this is extraordinarily dangerous to leave him alive. So that's where Chapter 1 ends, and Chapter 2, I think I like Chapter 2 a lot more than Chapter 1, just because it, like, kind of expands the story more. We're kind of out of, like, the reintroductions in Chapter 2, and we kind of get more into the story involving the main characters. So I'll cover that next time that we have a blank week for One Piece, but really digging Burn the Witch, really love the whole aspects of, like, what Kubo's going here with the duality and the reverse London things, while still keeping traits from Bleach to keep it kind of somewhat familiar, but you can really tell he's doing a whole different thing here. You can really tell Kubo's like, don't think of the witches and the wizards as just the Shinigami of London, because they're not. They're like something different, okay? So, yeah, I'm looking forward to see where this is going. I'll be talking about Chapter 2 next, and then I can't wait to see what Chapter 3 and Chapter 4 have in store. And who knows, like, this might be a thing where, like, for right now, Kubo only did, like, the limited run chapter, and maybe they want to see, like, okay, well, there's a lot of stuff involving Kubo coming up here. We got the chapters, we got the OVA for Burn the Witch, and we got Bleach coming back. So they might just be waiting and just seeing where this goes. They might be like, okay, everybody likes Bleach, well, a lot of people like Bleach. Bleach still has a very big fan following, but there's a lot of people that still don't like it. But anyway, the point is, when Bleach is announced to come back, that's kind of a fan base that already existed. Like me, and like a lot of other people, like a lot of you. Like, yeah, Bleach is back, yes. Now, Burn the Witch, this is something new. There's similarities to Bleach. It's in the same universe, but it's not the same thing. So maybe the people here are kind of like, all right, let's do this. We did the pilot chapter, and then we did this 4-chapter miniseries, and we're going to do this OVA thing. And we'll see where that goes from there. All right, and let's see how the success of relaunching the Bleach anime goes. If the relaunch goes successful, and if this OVA does really good, it might be kind of difficult because of, what's going on with the world and COVID and everything, but let's see how the numbers go for this OVA, and let's see how this whole, this limited run chapter, this 4-chapter thing really responds to the audience, and if this does well, there is definitely potential here for a full manga series. Like I said, probably not nearly as long as Bleach, because Bleach is like, almost 700 chapters. I don't think Kubo is in any hurry to do something that big again in his life. I think Bleach was like his his magnum opus, like just like how One Piece is going to be Oda's magnum opus. Oda is probably going to take a break after One Piece ends, and he might do other manga, like short things like this in the future, but he's never going to do something nearly as long as One Piece ever again, right? I kind of see the same thing with Kubo, but I'm just saying, if the numbers for this are really good and everything seems to be doing good with this, then we might get a series that's maybe like, I don't know, 100 chapters or something, maybe maximum. And we might get more of the story, more story arcs and interesting stuff, like they tell a story and then the story's over and then that's it. I'm not going to go something super crazy with this, but yeah, I can see Kubo maybe doing that if the numbers are good. So keep it up. I really would feel bad if this was something that just like, oh, we have a limited run manga and then an OVA and then just like it just kind of fizzles out and nobody was like, yeah, okay, Burn the Witch was all right. It's not a big deal though. It doesn't go anything beyond that. I really want to see more of this story, especially after reading the 2nd chapter, but we'll get into that next time. Thanks for watching, everybody. This will be Tekking and Barry signing out. Whoosh! Forgot my flannel.